my name's Joyce Harper and I'm Professor at the Institute for Women's Health at University College London, and I've just finished writing a book called What Every Woman Should Know, and I want to tell you why I've written this book. When I finished my PhD in 1987, I was really aware that my non-science friends didn't understand how their bodies worked. At that time, we were in our 20s and we were trying not to get pregnant, and they didn't understand how their menstrual cycle worked, how their fertility worked, and certainly how contraception worked. So I started writing a book about women's health. I'd looked around about what books were available, and there was the fabulous book called Our Body, Our Cells, but it didn't quite cover everything I wanted to say. So I worked on the book for a few years, but I was young and really not qualified at that time to write this book. And years disappear rapidly and roll on 30 years, and now my friends are going through the menopause, and still now in 2018 we do not have a really good source of information about women's health. So it was time to get that book written. There is some information on websites here and there are some books, but I wanted What Every Woman Should Know to cover women's health from birth to death. So there are 10 chapters. In chapter 1, I start in a chapter that I think everyone needs to read, and that is how to be healthy. I talk about nutrition, exercise and sleep, but also what can go wrong, such as anxiety, anger, depression. Then in chapter 2, I talk about our anatomy, about puberty and the menstrual cycle. It's amazing how many women use the wrong term for our bits. Instead of saying our vulva, we actually call it a vagina, and that's incorrect. And obviously I need to go through what happens to girls during puberty, and then I explain in detail what happens during the menstrual cycle and how that all develops and what it means to us. I talk about premenstrual syndrome and also about sanitary products, including the brilliant Moon Cup. In chapter 3, it's time to talk about sex. So I'm going to go through everything you need to know about sex. And I thought I knew it all, but I can tell you I learned a few things writing that chapter. But with sex, unfortunately, comes the risk of sexually transmitted infections, and we have to think about contraception. So chapters 4 and 5 cover those topics. In chapter 6, I talk about fertility. Most women at some point will want to consider having a family. So I talk about how we need to look after ourselves before we have a family, how we can get a family, the optimum ways of getting pregnant, what happens during pregnancy, the sort of tests that we can have, and then also what happens during birth. Then in the next chapter, I'm going to go on to infertility. Unfortunately, I hope that many people do not have to go through fertility treatment. I did. I went through 5 years of fertility treatment to have my 3 sons, and it's a really hard road. But I will go through the diagnosis of infertility, the treatments that are offered, and the limitations of that. And then in chapter 8, I'm going to go through the menopause. Many of my friends that are going through this have read this chapter, and I've had really positive response at how they've all learned something from reading this. I'm going to go through the symptoms of the menopause, both short and long-term symptoms, and what we can do to make that journey better. But my take-home message from that chapter is after the menopause, life is fabulous. I can tell you, I feel so brilliant after the menopause. In chapter 9, I'm going to talk about disorders that affect women. So things like polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, but also the diseases that kill women globally, such as cardiovascular disease and cancer, and what we can do about it. And relating back to chapter 1, how we can be healthy. And in the last chapter, chapter 10, I'm going to talk about the later years, the things we need to consider, how we might want to live our lives, and also considerations of a living will, so we can think about some of those hard decisions that we're going to have to make at some point in our lives. So that's the outline of what every woman should know. But writing this book wasn't just about providing the information in a hard form to women. I've also wanted a dialogue with women and a conversation. So a few years ago, I set up a website called globalwomenconnected.com, and with my team of helpers, we have written hundreds of posts, maybe thousands, hundreds of posts covering all issues to do with women's health and well-being. So we've also covered global issues that affect women's well-being, and that's been some fabulous research for my book. But I also want to meet women face to face. So in January last year, I set up a monthly meeting in my town called the Purple Tent, and we have fabulous meetings. The aim of this is to come out feeling motivated and positive. We've talked about our bucket lists, female icons, how music affects our lives. It's been really great, and looking forward to continuing this. And the thought of the purple tent really came from the global movement of the red tent, which is for women that are in their fertile and menstruating years. And the purple tent is aimed at any woman, but especially those women over 40. But also I want to do more face-to-face education. So I want to take out a roadshow where I give TED-type lectures about different topics that I've covered in What Every Woman Should Know. And I give women a chance to have a question and answer session so that they don't just leave the event with so many questions. We can sit around and discuss the topics that I've talked about. Now, I want to do these with a number of people. I want to do them with some experts. So we have one planned, the first one planned in June in my hometown, and I've got together some women that are going to talk about nutrition, coaching, exercise, and all those issues we should think about, and it's called Wellbeing Over 40. But I've also recently been working with a number of artists, theatrical artists, that have been doing fabulous, engaging work on many of the topics I've talked about in my book. So I want to work with them where they show their theatrical piece. I can give some science around that, and then again we have the question and answer sessions. I really want to get those conversations going with women. So there's many exciting things happening. I'm really looking forward to What Every Woman Should Know finally getting published. And I would like to add that I have been asked about what every man should know. I have 3 sons and they've certainly asked me, but so have others. And that is certainly going to be my next project. If you want to know anything more about the book or about me, please visit my website, joyceharper.com, and follow me on Twitter @Prof Joyce Harper. Thank you very much.